Okay, with the first discussion video going over such a light topic, I thought for the second one I'd go for a more hard-hitting question. Why are people proud about not doing pet battles? Because there's nothing more serious and important than talking about pet battles. To lay the groundworks for this discussion, I make videos about pet battles from time to time, and I even have my own little pet battle channel. And there's this common trend I see with comments to those kinds of videos, or the attitude towards pet battles in general when I see it on other places that talk about WoW. And the main theme is people bragging about having never tried pet battles before, as if it's an accomplishment. And people joining in these discussions and upvoting it. There's a lot of people who do this, and it's kind of surprising. So let's try to get into why people might be proud about not doing something. First one, the biggest thing people like to bring up, pet battles is basically just Pokemon. And if you want to play Pokemon, go play Pokemon. And to which I say, World of Warcraft is basically, easier EverQuest. Just go play EverQuest. Dota 2 is just an upgraded version of Dota 1. Go play Warcraft 3 mods. Overwatch, it's just Team Fortress 2. Why play Overwatch when you can just go play Team Fortress 2? Basically, this argument boils down to because the game system exists somewhere else previously, you should only be playing the original version of that game system. But what if it's just a fun little mini-game inside WoW? What's wrong with wanting to play a fun mini-game system inside of a video game? I don't know about you, but I love mini-games inside games. It's just pet battles happen to be a really big one. And if you really enjoy the pet battle system in WoW, then you'd probably like Pokemon too, except that's like a whole other different ballgame. That being said, just because the mechanics of the game exist in a more detailed and fleshed out version somewhere else, doesn't really discredit the mechanics of other games that copy it. Because that's one of the things Blizzard got really well known for, was not innovating mechanics, but taking existing game mechanics and polishing them. And not to say Pet Battles is, a super great version of Pokemon. It's like it's a different version. It's much more simple and much more dumbed down, but they change enough to it where if you do play both of them like I do, because I've been playing Pokemon games since I was in 3rd grade, Pet Battles does enough to distinguish itself from Pokemon while also having the same turn-based combat system. But that also doesn't stop the popular opinion of, just go play the real version of the game. Why waste your time with a mini-game version of it? Which is interesting that so many people think this. I'm interested in, legitimate other opinions on this matter. But anyways, enough of that. Let's go on to the next point. Because it's Blizzard dumbing down the game. True, Blizzard has been dumbing down the game a lot since Vanilla WoW to make it more casual friendly, so people can jump in better, because Blizzard's always catered to the casual audience, and that's why their games have succeeded, where games that cater to hardcore fans only, like EverQuest or more recently WildStar, have failed. Turns out, the majority of gamers are casual, despite what everyone who's obviously a Mythic Plus Raider, I don't think that's a thing, despite what everyone else might say on the internet. The amount of hardcore players is actually, surprisingly, pretty small. And a majority of players are mediocre, pretending to be hardcore players. And people who are pretending to be hardcore obviously don't like it when the game is being dumbed down. And Pet Battles is just an excuse to show why the game's being dumbed down. I don't think this is a really good reason. This is just one I have written down. Probably one of the reasons people probably don't like it, but I think the next one is probably a little bit better. Another reason people might not like Pet Battles, people proud about never doing them, is because Pet Battles is inherently childish or kiddie, because it's fighting carrots and snowmen and other ridiculous pets. And WoW, for the people who like to pretend they're hardcore players, is really serious business. Pet Battles on a whole are kind of ridiculous. Like, a lot of the pets are really cute looking and are basically pets. lots of rabbits and cats and dogs and tons of cockroaches and stuff and just weird shit. And Pokemon is obviously targeted towards children. So, since people equate pet battles to Pokemon, because the system of battle is very similar, they think of pet battles on a whole as a kiddie thing. And a lot of the people who might play the game, I think, I don't actually have exact numbers for this, but they're around the teenager age. Teenagers to young adults. And here's the thing about teenagers and young adults. That's the age in which you start liking more mature things. Because as you're growing up, if your parents controlled what you watched well enough, you should have only been watching kids show with really kiddie morals. The hero always wins, the good guys are always really good, and the bad guys are really bad and laughably evil. And then as you grow up and you can start understanding the nuances of a story better, you get tired of all of the super kiddie stuff because that's all you've known your entire life, your very short life. And so all of this new stuff is, all the gritty, dark, edgy things, it's new and exciting because that's not what was in your kid shows you were watching, your entire life. And it's the greatest thing ever. And because of that, teenagers and young adults on a whole look down on kid stuff. In fact, one of the hallmarks of a young teen is trying to pretend to be older. There is nothing a teenager likes more than to be called an adult, because they idolize adult things. And something on the kiddie side is obviously not good, especially in their somewhat mature game, with Sylvanas burning a tree with civilians in it. In the same game that has that, there's also these pets with fighting carrots and snowmen fighting each other, which is obviously really kiddie and ridiculous, and just Pokemon, and nobody likes those kiddie things. Again, none of these are all, singular arguments. These are all just ideas I have of why there's a general negative opinion towards pet battles. Blizzard has said themselves a couple of times in interviews that pet battles on a whole are a success. They're really popular, people really like them. It's just there is a popular opinion to dislike them, despite the fact that they are a successful addition to the game. Like, I remember when the pet battle dungeons first came out, people complained like crazy at Blizzard spending their time on a pet battle dungeon instead of making a new raid. People really don't like it when new pet battle stuff is added, despite the fact that those things usually do pretty well. But that's neither here nor there. I was talking about, pet battles being inherently kiddie, and why that could be a reason a video game that's target demographic is teenagers and young adults might not like it very much. The next point is it's too much of a grind. Pet battles is meant to be an extra endgame thing you do if you have nothing else to do, or if you want something extra to do for fun. So there is tons to do if you're a new pet battler. In fact, there might be too much to do, because in order to get a proper team, in order to start leveling up your pets, you're going to have to grind out levels, which takes a really long time at the beginning of it, and it might just seem too much of a chore. There's this thing of setting small goals and not looking at the bigger picture if you want to actually get stuff done. If you're trying to clean your house, you don't set a goal to clean everything in one day. You set goals to clean up, your office space for today, and then you do something else tomorrow. If you set small, accomplishable goals, you'll actually have a better chance of getting it all done. And if you just look at the problem as a whole, it'll mentally tire you out from the amount of work you have to do. So if you look at pet battles as a whole, when there's so much to do, and there's so many pets to level up and grind, grinding to actually get the pets too, because there's tons and tons of ways to obtain pets in the game. It can just seem like too much, which psychologically can get people put off from it. Alright, this next point I actually kind of covered. Pet battles take development time from other things. Yeah, when the pet battle dungeon was released for the first time, people complained very heavily about this. I'm sure it does take development time, and they probably do shift stuff around from other things. But as someone who's done all the pet battle content, there really isn't that much they do. Even the pet battle dungeons, they just take an existing dungeon and add pet battles into it. The only thing they're making for that are a couple of unique pets for that dungeon, which you can then earn as pets for yourself. I can't imagine that takes any more time than just developing a normal dungeon. And definitely less time than they would spend on a raid. Then again, I'm not a developer. I don't have any inside knowledge. All I know is I do pet battles, and they don't really do that much. It's really just an addition to the game that you can do for fun after you've done everything else. And it's a very time-extensive side project you can do. And since pet battle content is always current content, if you start today, you have like the past 3 or 4 expansions worth of additions to go through, and it's all current stuff. Let's see, this next point I have here is scapegoating other problems with the game, i.e. my class isn't balanced because Blizzard spends too much time adding new pets into the game. I don't really see this as too much of a problem. I don't really see this too much. I have seen this comment a couple of times, but this kind of goes into the other thing. It's development time for other stuff. Let's just go into the next one. I don't want to talk about the same point twice. Bandwagoning. Lots of people hate it, so they might as well hate it too. Because pet battles are popular to hate on, other people will hate on it just because it's popular to hate on. You know, bandwagoning, that's exactly the definition of it. Kind of like the current bandwagon for BFA is to hate it. And if you say anything counter to that, you're obviously just a Blizzard shill who's being paid to talk positively about it. There are lots of people who don't actually try things out to form their own opinions on it. Case in point, popular TV shows like Game of Thrones or The Walking Dead. I've personally watched both of them, and both are very well loved and very popular. Of the two, Game of Thrones is amazing, and I personally loved it to death, and I've read all the books and everything. The Walking Dead is garbage, and I hate it, and it's a terrible show, and I don't understand why it's so popular. I gave it a shot, and it's just so bad. But both are very popular shows, and I came to my own conclusions after watching them. With more unpopular opinions, like The Big Bang Theory or Twilight, I think The Big Bang Theory is kind of funny, because I don't take my comedy super seriously. It's not the best comedy in the world, but it's also not as terrible as people make it out to be. There's just a huge bandwagon to hate on it because it's so popular, despite being a mediocre comedy. Same with Twilight. I read the Twilight books before the movies came out. The movies, definitely not the greatest. Books, perfectly mediocre though. I actually kind of enjoyed them. The movies just kind of over-exaggerate a lot of stupid shit. The books were a lot better. I still like the Twilight universe to an extent, because the way they did the vampire powers was, interesting. I don't think I've ever seen it done another way like that before. All vampires in the series have normal vampire powers, except the sun doesn't kill them, which is kind of a staple in vampire lore with lots of other pieces of media that have vampires, because if they're killed so easily by sunlight, then that kind of makes them weak to a lot of different things. So a lot of vampire fiction negates the sunlight problem in some way, shape, or form. Theirs was just to have it all sparkly. But they also added the fact that all vampires get a special power in addition to their other stuff, which I found pretty interesting. Now, despite the fact that Big Bang Theory and Twilight are universally panned and hated upon, and there's a huge bandwagon that you are basically less of a person if you liked or enjoyed either of them, I come to my own opinions about these kinds of things. I also do enjoy lots of things that aren't popular. World of Warcraft is the most popular MMO, and I enjoy that. I prefer Heroes of the Storm to League of Legends, but I've tried out League of Legends and I thought it was a perfectly fine game. Game of Thrones, one of the most popular TV shows in the world, I love it. But bandwagoning is a powerful thing, and there's tons of people who do it. I even have some friends who I know for a fact don't form their own opinions on things, and have admitted as much, and I just find it crazy that there's some people who unabashedly aren't ashamed about never forming their own opinions on things. And my last point on this little thing is people just legitimately don't like its simplified combat, and its PvP is a mess. Pet battles aren't perfect. There's lots of problems with them. It has a system similar to Pokemon, but Pokemon has a lot more choices to it. But also pet battles do a lot of things different that I kind of like when compared to Pokemon. In Pokemon, it's really common for your team, if it's not built perfectly, to be one-shot by an opponent's super effective move, which doesn't happen in pet battles. If you have a team that's not built perfectly, you actually kind of stand a chance if you outplay your opponent, which is not possible in Pokemon. But also, it is much more simplified, and if you prefer Pokemon, it's perfectly valid not to like pet battles. And its PvP system is just a hot garbage mess. I've heard they're finally making plans to fix the PvP pet battle system, but since its introduction, it's been the same, and it's terrible. So any improvement onto what they have now is going to be better. Alright, and this is where I ask you guys questions, where I open the discussion. Do you like pet battles? Do you hate them? Have you ever tried them? And if you haven't, are you proud about the fact that you've never tried them? That's kind of the important thing here. Most people don't brag about never doing something unless it's something actually, tempting, like never doing drugs is an admirable thing. Especially if you live in a place where drugs run rampant or something like that. Never doing pet battles, though, I don't think that's comparable. That's kind of a weird thing to be proud about. But that's just to say, not being proud about doing something, there are some cases where it's totally legitimate. So I'd like to hear your opinions on it. And also, I welcome any discussion about any of the points I made. Or if you want to downvote the video because I shared my controversial opinions on liking unpopular things.